I'm Anna Vagan, and now let's talk about rubrics. 80% performance doesn't work so well for goals about social interaction. You can't say hi 80% of the time or ask questions 80% of the time. And this is where rubrics can provide us a more accurate way to identify the metric by which we will measure progress. Rubrics give us a way to write goals that are meaningful, functional, attainable, and understandable. And once you get the hang of it, rubrics actually make it easier to be accountable. We can also integrate rubrics into our assessment phase. And they're just a terrific way to gather evidence from multiple sources like families and teachers. For the Conversation Paths Pack expanded version, because of the complexity of conversation, you're going to find quite a few rubrics. In fact, there are 4 of them. The interactive conversation rubric talks about aspects of conversation that we know are important, like paying attention and being curious and taking turns in a timely fashion. But of course, that's not all there is to conversation. There's also the conversation frames. In conversation paths, the different pieces of the paths are the frames. A conversation frame might be a question, or it might be a comment, or it might be a pop-in or an interjection. Additionally, I've given you a rubric on goal attainment scaling that is used not so much in the United States, but in other countries as a way of setting up goals, looking at not just what we want to attain, but what might it look like if we go beyond what we think we can achieve. And if you don't know about the GAS scaling rubrics, I really encourage you to take a look at them. I think actually of all the rubrics here, these are the most interesting. So I encourage you to look at them and think about incorporating them into your work. Additionally, there are practice activity rubrics, and these talk about the additional practice activities that you can cut and paste into the paths so your students can have some extra practice. There is a tutorial for each of these different rubrics. I know there's a lot of information here, and so I've broken it down so you can kind of look at it and absorb it piece by piece. Right now, let's look at the general framework of all of the rubrics. Every rubric has a concept at the top, and in that left-hand column, the concepts are listed, like the Conversation Paths practice activities then are listed. The next section over is date and score. It gives you a place to do quarterly reporting. You can always add columns or change it if you want to change the frequency with which you do your general reviews of progress. The next set of columns in this overview, columns G through J, are the actual rubric. And this is where you'll see various performance levels that we're looking for as it relates to this concept. What's important to remember with a rubric is that it has to go with the goals, and it's very helpful to attach the rubric to an IEP, in part because at the bottom there is room for definitions. What are you specifically talking about in a concept that's listed above? We all want to make sure we're on the same page. So the definitions are listed in this peach area. Down below on the rubrics, there's a little bit of extra information, typically a link where you can get more information. Going over to the right-hand side, all of this green area is for specific student information, their name, their placement, the goals that you've written. This is all that is in sheet 1. You see it down here called rubric template. This is what you can copy and use for your individual students. There is another tutorial about how to do that if you're not familiar with using Excel. The second sheet, here it's labeled Sample Filled Out. And when you click on it, we see a little bit more information. All of this blue and peach would be the same, except here there would be progress noted as far as how the student is doing. But over here in the green, there's a place where you would put the progress for both goals if the student has two goals. And then there's a graph of progress. Always nice to walk into an IEP with a visual support. There's another tutorial about how to make a graph in Excel if you're not familiar with that. So this is the general format for all of the rubrics that are included in the Conversation Paths Pack expanded version. If at some point you no longer need to see the example, you could just delete the sheet. You right click, and then you would click delete, and it would just disappear. So this is the general overview to the rubrics. Again, our field is transitioning. We're in an area of transition where we're changing from that 80% of the time goal to using something that is more descriptive, that can include, I think, more cooperation and discussion with families and with students about what they want to work on. What would it look like for you if you could improve in this particular area? What are you aiming for? So take your time. A good rubric to start with might be the Conversation Frames rubric. I would suggest you look at that one first, because again, the frames are the pieces of the conversation paths. But when you feel ready, check out all of these rubrics, and I think you'll appreciate their value in our work.